Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shiloh. My pronouns are he and him, and welcome to the Affirming Reflections live stream. Today, we're going to be discussing and chatting a little bit about bisexual misconceptions or myths. Bisexuality is a very common sexuality. It's been around since humans have been alive. For many of you that may not know the direct definition, I can definitely give that to you. So what is bisexuality? Originally, bisexuality meant that a person who is experiencing attraction to both men and women. So this was the common definition of the time. This was because at that time there was a common understanding that there was only two genders of male and female, and so bisexual folks were those that were attracted to both men and women. But with the increasing awareness of non-binary folks as well as more gender identities coming to the forefront, this definition has changed over time. We see now that a bisexual person is someone who experiences attraction to some people of their own gender and another gender. So bisexual attraction does not have to be equally split between the two. It can be, attracted to majority of men or a majority of non-binary people or a majority of females. Each bisexual person has their own level of attraction. There is also a difference between bisexual and pansexual. So pansexual is, by definition, someone who is attracted to any and all genders, whereas bisexual, it usually means your own and another, or at least two or more. And so there are some similarities between bisexual folks and pansexual folks. But to know that the main nitty-gritty differences is that for bisexual people, their gender, the gender of their partners kind of matters. Not in the grand scheme of things, but it does matter to who they will engage with in a romantic or a sexual relationship. Whereas for folks who are pansexual, their partner's gender has no implications at all. So these are just a few of the definitions of bisexuality. Some folks who may be tuning in right now that identify as bisexual may have different definitions of how they identify, and there are many more around the world who define their bisexuality different than how I explained. So just know that those definitions are also valid. I'm just coming from an academic standpoint, not an experience standpoint. So from an academic definition, it's usually folks who have attraction to their own and an opposite, or their own and a different type of gender. But again, anyone's definition may change or evolve for themselves. So because we're talking about myths and misconceptions around bisexuality, I have to talk about biphobia. So many of you might have seen that there are a lot of talks about homophobia and transphobia. But what about biphobia? Why do we even bother saying biphobia when we can just say, homophobia? So for biphobia, it's essentially the aversion towards bisexuality and bisexual people as individuals. So folks who are being biphobic are specifically talking about bi folks, not just the LGBTQ community, and that is why it's important to say that there is biphobia and not just erase it and just say homophobia. Some other forms of biphobia is the denial that bisexuality is a genuine sexual orientation. It can also take form of negative stereotypes that happen, and we'll see a little bit of those with some of the myths that I'll be talking about. Another form of biphobia is bisexual erasure or bi erasure, which I'll talk about a little bit more later and more in depth. Some other forms of biphobia is where, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So for biphobia, just like homophobia and transphobia, it's a lot of these micro incidents and microaggressions that are not so much individual, but more of a broader cultural kind of stigma that's been happening, and it's where the culture and the groups that we're in society is is perpetuating that hatred and disdain for LGBTQ folks. And then with biphobia, it's that larger culture and disdain for folks who identify as bisexual. And lastly, I want to just explain that you don't have to be straight and cisgender in order to be biphobic. You can be any sexual orientation or any gendered identity and still experience biphobia, as well as perpetuate biphobia. So even if you are, transgender and gay, you can still be biphobic. That doesn't erase some of the things that you may contribute or perpetuate. Me, myself, I have definitely accidentally been biphobic many, many times, especially when I was younger. And those are things that I'm trying to fix and apologize for, and now I'm doing my best to be a bisexual ally and to help educate folks who tune in for today. So what is bi-erasure? I know I said that a few times, or bisexual erasure. It's also called bisexual invisibility. So this is the tendency to ignore, remove, falsify, or re-explain the evidence of bisexuality. And this can be done through history, academia, news, or other primary sources, either online or in print, or even just between families and stories. The most extreme form of bi-erasure is where those folks may believe that bisexuality does not exist at all. So they believe that bisexuality is not a sexual orientation and that those who identify as bisexual are just lying. Another form of bisexual erasure may include the assertion that all bisexual individuals are in this type of phase, and that at the end of this bisexual phase, they will eventually choose a side, either being heterosexual or homosexual. So this is another form of bi-erasure, that once bi folks get into a relationship, either if the partner is male, female, or otherwise, they're then locked into a different type of sexual orientation and no longer can identify as bisexual. And this is not the case. This is just a simple erasing of their identity. Once they're in a relationship, they are still bisexual. Another form of erasure is that it's this belief that bisexual individuals are distinctively indecisive, so that they are only bisexual because they can't choose a gender that they're attracted to. The reason why this is just absurd is just even the word that I use, choose. We all know that sexual orientation and gender identity is not something that we choose. It is something that is innate and inherent to our own identity and our own bodies. So to say that, bisexual people only exist because they can't decide on a person or a gender just goes against what sexual orientation is in general. Bisexual erasure often results in bisexual identifying individuals to experience a lot of different social encounters. And they have to find acceptance not only in the straight cis society that we live in now, but also within the LGBTQ community. I know as a trans person, I kind of can relate a little bit to this, as with the trans community as well. We're often, we often find it hard to find acceptance in both the straight and the gay community, just because, being trans in itself as well is really hard for some folks to wrap their heads around. And same with bisexual. There's a lot of folks in the LG community, and even in the trans community, that just don't understand bisexuality, and that is why they perpetuate a lot of this bi-erasure and biphobia. And another variant of bisexual erasure is involving the difference between bisexual men and bisexual women. So I know that this is very binary at this point, but you'll understand why. So for example, if a woman, someone who identifies as a woman is bisexual, she will often be praised for her bisexuality, or even, I guess, praised or sexualized, I guess is a better way to put it, for her sexuality, for her bisexuality, because then for a common quote is where, you know, men will be really excited that their female partners are bisexual because then they can, you know, bring in another woman, or that they appreciate other women like they do. So oftentimes being a bisexual woman is seen as a great thing. And then on the flip side, if you talk about bisexual men, we have a lot of misogyny that comes out of this, where then bisexual men are often called sissies or gay, or that their bisexuality is just not inherent and that it's just a choice. So we see that between men and women who identify as bisexual, there's two very different understandings in society of how they are going to interact with others. And again, I'm coming from a trans perspective. This kind of relates a little bit as well between trans men and trans women. Very different experiences in the world, and same with bisexual men and women. And even non-binary folks, they often sometimes are thrown into this binary as well, where they have their own, you know, struggles and barriers to overcome with society's understanding of gender and gender roles, and with that combined with sexuality. So let's jump in. What are some of the common misconceptions and myths of bisexuality? For folks who are tuning in who identify as bi and who would like to contribute or kind of share a little bit of your story, if you're only comfortable enough to do so, please feel free to throw them in the comments. I'd love to read some of your experiences with some of these myths, or even if I missed a few, to please share them. We'd love to hear from more voices for sure. So the first common myth is that bisexuals are only attracted to binary genders. So there's a lot of discussion around whether the bi in bisexuality refers to only cisgender women and cisgender men, and it doesn't. I know at the time it was that, like I said before, the increase representation around non-binary genders and more genders. Bisexuality is not only attracted to binary genders. You can be bisexual and be attracted to more than the binary genders. You may be a bisexual who is attracted to binary genders, but again, like I said, each bisexual person has their own experience of sexuality, and so there might be some bi folks who are only attracted to men and women, but there are some that are attracted to more than just the binary. For me, I like to share that bisexuality in itself can be described better, and the way that I like to describe it, kind of similarly to the description that I put, is that bisexuality is attracted to genders similar to and different from their own. And it could also just mean that you're attracted to two or more genders, and that's all it is. So bisexual folks are not only attracted to the binary. That is no longer the definition and no longer the case. Another myth that we have within the bisexual community is that bi people are only bi when they are dating someone who is the same gender of their own. So this, again, is a myth. Sexuality is not dependent on the gender or sexuality of the people they're in a relationship with. Bisexual folks are still bi regardless of the gender their partner is. So if a bi person identifies as a female and is dating a woman, yes, their relationship can be considered a same gendered relationship, but that doesn't remove their identity as being bisexual. And Pan joins us, but what about pansexuality, Shiloh? I talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but now we're going to not talk about those today. But I'd love to chat a little bit about misconceptions around pansexuality, and that could be another live stream for the future. Also, bisexual people don't only date cisgender people, and they also bisexual people aren't straight either. So this is a vice versa as well. So if a bi person is dating someone who is a different gender of their own, and that partnership appears to be heterosexual, again, that doesn't erase the identity of the person. That doesn't make them straight. They are still bi, but they are in a heterosexual relationship. So that's kind of like how they would describe it. And so, yeah. Another misconception or myth is that bisexuals are 50% gay and 50% straight. Bisexual people are bisexual. There's no half gay, half lesbian, or half straight. That's all just a myth. And by viewing bisexuality this way, as this 50-50, you're saying that being bisexual is inherently not complete, and that there is this lack of being complete or full. And I can relate a little bit to this with my ethnicity of being Métis. We are often seen as being 50-50 as well, and I can definitely say from my experience that that's not the case. And so for bisexual folks, it's not this 50% gay, 50% straight mentality. It's an inherent sexuality that people have, and it's not some kind of mixed-matched thing where they're kind of an in-between. That's not the case. Another myth is that bisexual people are all cheaters, or are very sexually active, or sleep with multiple people. All of these misconceptions encompass a few false beliefs about bi people. A few of them are that bi people may be afraid of commitment. That is not true. They may be incapable of picking a side, or that the attraction to multiple genders always happens to remove their ability to be monogamous. So all of these are false. They're all myths. Like, again, there are bisexual people who do, you know, cheat. You know, they're straight, and there are, gay people who cheat. There are bi people who want to have sex with multiple different people. There are straight and gay people who do the same. And there are plenty of bisexual people who are in monogamous relationships and don't cheat and are not sexually or hypersexual. Again, it's painting a broad brush over the bisexual community here with a lot of these misconceptions. They are not true. And if they are true, it's for that distinct person and not for the bisexual community as a whole. Let's see. Another one is that bisexuality is just a phase. So, no, bisexuality is not a phase. It's not this kind of next step before getting to another step. Bi men are not all secretly gay, and bi women are not all really straight. That's just not the case. There are people who do identify as bi and then do later come out as gay or lesbian. I was the case. I've definitely done that. When I was 12, 13, I knew that I was attracted to women, but I still kind of had an attraction to men. Looking back, it was more so just the heteronormativity around me. But I thought I was bisexual, and a lot of people kind of forced that on me as well, especially folks in my family who were afraid that I would be a lesbian. They were hoping and banking on me being bisexual so that maybe I could date a man and marry a man and have a normal life. Again, this is bisexual erasure here. And I did stop identifying as bi, and I came out as lesbian, and now I'm a straight man, so here we are. But yeah, so if you do identify as bisexual and then do later come out as either gay or lesbian or as straight, it doesn't invalidate the bisexuality that you did have at the time, nor does it invalidate the bisexuality as a sexual orientation as a whole either. Just because it may be a phase for some people doesn't mean that it's a phase for all people. And so I just wanted to bring that to light as well. Another myth is that bisexual people have to try all the genders in order to know that they are bi. This one just makes me laugh. People aren't things to try. This is not a food tasting competition. It's, again, not true. For folks who may be straight who are tuning in, you know, how did you know that you liked men or women? You know, did you need to try them to know? I know I liked women before I, you know, kissed them or did anything sexual. Um, you know, as kids too, like we just innately know who we're attracted to and who we find beautiful and attractive. Um, and so to say that you need to try out different genders in order to know for sure that you are, you know, either gay or bisexual or anything is just simply not the case at all. Sexuality is a deep and inherent identity that we all have, and it's something that we just come to know and understand. But I will say that there is space that we hold for folks who do need to do that. There are folks who can't figure out their identities and need to go out and experiment with different types of partners in order to fully know, and that's totally okay. But to say that you can't know unless you do so, for everyone, is just not the case. For some, it might be, but for the majority, it's something that we know. You know, it's something that we come to learn, and it's something that we come to experiment with, and we eventually potentially come out. And that's how that happens. Another myth that kind of comes a little bit with this is that bisexual folks always want to participate in threesomes or be involved with polyamorous relationships. So this one's probably another really common one, kind of with the being sexually active or cheating. This one I hear the most, especially within the younger groups and online and in dating apps here, says one of the main complaints you'll hear from bisexual people is that when it comes to relationships, or especially on dating apps, people expect them to want to partake in a threesome. Some bisexual people are interested in threesomes. That's totally fine for them, but not all are. And that's the key, is not all. And the same with, you know, gay and straight people. Gay and straight people may be interested in many different things, and some might not be in others. So even within the bisexual community, there's so much diversity. And so to say that we are... to say that all bi people, you know, would jump up and down with happiness to join a threesome is just not the case. And even with threesomes, you don't have to be bi to join those either. There is inclusion for all threesomes, so if that's something that you want to do, have fun. And lastly, the last myth that I have here kind of relates a little bit to bi erasure here. It's the myth that bi erasure is a myth. So, you know, bi erasure happens all the time, and to say that bi erasure doesn't exist is also a misconception. And so some of the examples here is, you know, when we use gay as a, you know, catch-all term for events such as Pride, you know, saying gay pride. I know for me as a straight trans person, I feel erased as well when folks use gay as an all-encompassing term. And similarly to bi folks, they get that so much more, where, you know, the term gay and lesbian is often the two that are used, and bisexuality is often kind of supposed to be understood to be within those two words, but the lack of saying bisexuality is erasure in itself. Another thing of bi-erasure is that bisexual people are suddenly seen as gay, straight, or lesbian, and this kind of goes with the gender of their partners. And lastly, that when bi folks come out, they do not face any difficulties or discrimination for being bi. if you are bi and you're watching that right now, I probably can see you scuffing or laughing, saying that's not the case. Because it's not. Biphobia exists. There are many, many bi people who face discrimination and difficulties in their life because of their identity. I know a good friend of mine who works for Generous Space Ministries who came out as bisexual and lost his entire Christian community and his job because he came out as bisexual, even though he was already in a straight passing relationship with children. But he didn't want to, keep perpetuating bi erasure and saying that, you know what, I am bisexual. This is my identity. This is who I am, and take it or leave it. And he had a lot of difficulties and problems that came after that. So to say that bisexual people do not experience any type of discrimination is just false. Unfortunately, those in the LGBTQ community, regardless of the letter they identify as, we all have our own distinct difficulties depending on the identity, and we all experience discrimination because of the society and the cultures around us. So those are a few of the bisexual misconceptions and myths. If I missed any, please let me know. We have the comments open. We have my messages as well, so please send me a message if there was a few that you missed. I'd love to kind of hear your own experiences and some of your stories as well. But to end off, as you know, I always like to end off with practical stuff. So I'm a very practical person. Great that we learned about all of these bisexual myths. But what now? What can we do to, erase those myths? What can we do to help the lives of our bisexual friends and families? And so here I'm going to give you a few tools to end off with on how to be better bisexual allies. So the first one is to view bisexual people as individuals. It's easy to lump a single group of people together, and it's hard to resist that. But like anyone else, bisexual people are their own individuals. They have their own personalities, their own preferences, their own experiences, and so every single person is very different. And even the explanations that I share today are a very umbrella explanation and does not include all bisexual people and their own experiences. It's very, everyone is very individual, and that's something that we need to remember. Another way to be a better ally to bisexual folks is to challenge those negative stereotypes and to educate others. So as you expanded your knowledge today on bisexual people, speak up when you hear folks, perpetuating harmful stereotypes or misconceptions or myths. If you hear someone say, "Oh, all bisexual people are cheaters," stop them and say, "You know what? No, that's not the case. I have friends who are in lifelong committed relationships. I know so many different bi people who are single. And challenging and erasing those negative stereotypes and educating people on why the things that they are saying are not helpful and are actually harmful." And sometimes we don't even know that we've absorbed some of these negative stereotypes, so we might be even perpetuating them without our knowledge. And so this is where, understanding our own privilege and taking the time to learn really helps bring out those negative stereotypes within our own understandings. And this is why things like media and television and film need to have accurate representation of LGBTQ folks, because those types of representation are then ingrained in our youth and our children, and eventually when they grow up, these misconceptions that are often shown in films that we grew up with, they'll have a better all-around understanding of bisexual people without a lot of these stereotypes and myths that we grew up around. Another way is to help, advocate for better healthcare education, and those who might be in the healthcare right now, being better to educate yourself by being well-being in the healthcare system. I have a story here about a person named Beach, last name Beach, and they had a few sexual partners. And one of the nurse asked them, how many sexual partners do you have or have you had? And this person was like, well, what do you mean by sex? Like, what do you mean, like, what is your, I guess, line? Like, where's the line? What is sex and what's not sex? And the practitioner, questioned it and was like, you know, deep, vaginal intercourse. And so when they were like, well, I was only clarifying because I'm bisexual, so I've had both male and female partners, I want to know if I should be counting my female partners. And then the practitioner automatically assumed that this person's number of sexual partners would be more than 10, when in reality it was like 1 or 2. So these type of things, having better understanding of how to ask clients on their sexual history, the language that they're using for partners as well, and just to have a better understanding that not everyone is straight and cisgender. That's just like, healthcare is one thing. Oh my gosh, I need to do a live stream just on healthcare in itself, about how difficult it is to be LGBTQ and go seeing a doctor, especially trans folks, especially non-binary folks. Like, it is so difficult just to get a checkup, because a lot of healthcare providers aren't getting the education that they need to help serve us as a type of community. Thankfully, things are getting better. I have many friends in the healthcare system now who've been able to be taught and learn so much more within their studies. So hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a huge positive increase in how healthcare is providing needs and supports for the LGBTQ community. And last but not least, always use inclusive language. This kind of goes a little bit with the healthcare provider one, but, gay is not an inclusive term. I'm just going to say it now. It's not. It is not. Saying LGBTQ is better. Even maybe queer, depending on the place they are at. Not all people enjoy the term queer. But if you're wanting to say LGBTQ community, say queer community or LGBTQ community. Don't say the gay community. Because there are many of us who aren't gay. There are bisexual people who are not gay. There are lesbians who are not gay. There are trans folks like me who are not gay. So saying the gay community is erasing at least 1/8 of the entire community. And so having more inclusive language is one way to perpetuate, or to perpetuate a better understanding of bisexual identities. And lastly, using other inclusive language as well, like within partners, asking, like, what is your partner's name or your spouse's name, instead of saying boyfriend or girlfriend, or gendered terms like that. So there's so many ways to use inclusive language to stop perpetuating these negative stereotypes that bisexual people endure, and wrongly so. Bisexual people often get the blunt end of a lot of the stereotypes, and negative stereotypes especially, within the sexual orientation side of the LGBTQ community. And so these are some of the myths that I've seen. Feel free to throw some in the comments if I missed any. And these are some of the steps that you can do to be a better ally to our bisexual siblings. And so I hope you learned a few things today, and I will see you Thursday morning if you want to join me for my Affirming Coffee Hour. It is an hour long. Feel free to join at any time. It is a drop-in. But feel free to join either later or right at 11, and it's just the hour. Bring a coffee for you to drink, and it meets on Zoom. And if not, we will see you next Monday on the Affirming Reflections at noon, and I will see you then. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.